I read 24 books in June, so grab a snack or a beverage because we're gonna be here for a while. Hi, I'm Alex, this is Pucks and Paperbacks, and today I will be sharing my June wrap-up. Yes, you heard it right, I read 24 books. Some were audiobooks, some were graphic novels, and those all count as reading. You're probably wondering, how did I do that? It was the Amazing Readathon. The Amazing Readathon is a Amazing Race-inspired readathon created by my friend Brianna over at Four Paws in a Book, and this is one of my favorite readathons. I participated last year, I participated this year, and I will participate every year because it is so much fun. It's just 1 month out of the year where you get to read a bunch of books, you're on a team, and it is the most fun you could have as a reader. I love having games or challenges to make my reading more fun. I love following prompts, so this is perfect for me. I will link her down below so you can get to know her and just get to know more about the readathon because it is going to be happening again in 2025. I'm so excited. I was on Team Fiction and we won! I could not believe that. I am so proud of our team. We did such a great job. I am so proud of our team. We were the smallest team and we came in first place. There were so many times that we thought it wasn't happening, but we rallied together and we won it all. I cannot believe I'm even saying that. I had so much fun being on Team Fiction and I can't wait to do it again next year. My camera is telling me it's dying and I have 24 books to talk about. So I'm gonna have to charge my camera, but I promise I will be back. Okay, let's do this. I will be reading off my computer sometimes because I had to write notes for myself so I wouldn't forget what the books are about. If you're new to my channel, I do not give books star ratings, so you're not gonna see that at all on my channel or even in this video. I strictly just review them. Ratings don't work for me. You will catch me looking down at my computer sometimes because I have notes. There's way too many books for me to physically remember what they were all about and what I thought of them. Let's get into it. I will be sharing the city prompts and some other prompts that we got throughout the month. Our first destination for the Amazing Readathon was Toronto, Canada, and to get there we had to read a book we didn't purchase. On Libby, I ended up reading the Luis Ortega Survival Club by Sonora Reyes. I talk more about it in my video where I let bookstores' most recent Instagram photo pick what I read, so I'll have that video linked up above for you and down below if you want to check it out. My full review is in that video. This is a YA contemporary revenge story. This has queerness and neurodivergence. The main character, Ari, is autistic and she also becomes nonverbal at some points. She has selective mutism. I really enjoyed her perspective and being in her head. This is a revenge story. It is pitched as John Tucker Must Die, which I can attest to. I think that is a great comp title for this. It is light, but at times it is also dark as it deals with SA. Content warnings for bullying, rape, not on page, but we talk about the aftermath. SA, specifically a slap on the butt, and sexual harassment. My next book was for sightseeing, and how the Amazing Readathon works is after you complete the city prompt, you can sightsee until you get the next prompt. So I started this on leg 1, and if I didn't finish it by the time we're on leg 2, I have to have it count for leg 2. But it did count for leg 1, and this is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This was a host favorite and a queer author, so I got 50 extra points for my team and 100 GRC. GRC was the currency, and so you had started with, I believe, 5,000, and then you are spending it as you go to each leg. So I ended up acquiring 100, which was really nice, but definitely should have done more host favorites as the month prolonged. I forgot to review Psalm for the Wild Built, so let's do it real quick. This is such a cozy read. It is a cozy sci-fi following a T-Monk sibling Dex and their journey to find their purpose. They were a T-Monk and just decided they didn't want to do that anymore, and they end up encountering a robot named Moscap, and this is their journey together. It is such a sweet book. I'm so glad I picked this up because if you know me, this is not the type of genre that I ever pick up, but because it was cozy, it helped so much more, and the audiobook was fantastic. Next, we went to Buenos Aires, and we had to read a book with two perspectives. So I chose Playing for Keeps by Jennifer Dugan. I started reading this in May during my birthday. I'll link that vlog up above, but I didn't finish it in May, so I was able to finish it in June. One of the Amazing Readathon rules was you had to submit books that you read in June, so I had to submit whatever page count I read in June. In total, Playing for Keeps is 320 pages. I had the e-arc from NetGalley, courtesy of Penguin Teen, and I ended up reading 231 pages in June, so I was able to get to Buenos Aires with that. I really enjoyed this. This was my first Jennifer Dugan, and I cannot wait to read more of her books. This is a YA sapphic romance following two girls, Ivy, who is a student ump, and June, who is a star baseball pitcher. This is a rivals to lovers, but it talks a lot about grief and pressure from your parents. Ivy has a complicated relationship with her mother post her brother's death, and her mother is giving her a lot of flack and pressure to go to college and puts a lot on her, saying, well, if her brother couldn't go to college, she should. But all Ivy wants to do is ump. She loves being an ump, and that's what she wants to do for the rest of her life. With June, she is grieving the loss of her mother, as well as dealing with a lot of pressure from her dad. He desperately needs her to get a scholarship for pitching. However, she is dealing with an injury that never healed properly, but she feels like she can't tell her dad that. I really enjoyed this because it had so much complexities. I love this because it has a lot of complexities. I love YA contemporaries that are dark and they talk about topics, especially when it's sports. I love stories that talk about injuries, and the fact that this was about girls is really important. I have never seen a book about umpiring, and I don't think I've read many baseball books that are about pitching. You know, I've read more hockey books than I've read baseball, but this was a really interesting dynamic, and I enjoyed it. I cannot wait to pick up more of her books. Next up on my radar is Melt With You. It is about an ice cream truck, which is really exciting. Content warnings for mentions of cancer, death to cancer, death of a parent, medical content, sports injury, and there is a panic attack on page. Next, we went to Berlin, Germany, and we had to read a book with movement in the title. And so I chose Falling Back in Love with Being Human, Letters to Lost Souls by Kai-Chen Thom. I love this author, and I'm so glad I got to pick up more of her work. I was sent this by Dial Press, so thanks so much to them for sending this over. I love Kai-Chen Thom. She is one of my favorite authors. What I love about the Amazing Readathon is I've picked up so many books that I would not usually pick up. They're books that I say I'll read sometime, but never actually give myself a purpose to read it, so the Amazing Readathon is great for that. I saw so many people on Queer Book Talk and Queer Bookstagram talking about this book, so I'm really glad I finally picked it up. Like it says, it is letters to lost souls, so it is love letters to people she hates, people she loves. I enjoyed it. There were some that I liked, some that I didn't, but overall, I enjoyed it. Content warnings for mention of SA, xenophobia, racism, anti-Asian hate. Specifically, they mention the hate crime that occurred towards Asian nail attacks, death, murder of trans women of color, suicidal ideations, and there is a poem dedicated to TERFs and JKR, but it is her therapeutically writing towards them about their hatred and fear for trans women. I thought that was very powerful. This wasn't my favorite, but I enjoyed what it did. There were some that I liked, some that I didn't. As you can see, I tabbed it a bunch. If you like poetry and you like this author, I recommend this. Then I started a sightseeing book for the prompt, a book that takes place in a different country than you live. I read Dawn Raid, My New Zealand Story by Pauline Vaeluaga Smith, and this was recommended by my friend Michelle over at Thor Wants Another Letter for my 12 for 12 challenge. This middle grade follows Sophia, a 12-year-old girl living in New Zealand who starts to learn about the forgotten history of the Polynesian panthers. People are protesting in town and her parents are telling her that it's nonsense. However, her brother is pretty smart and he starts telling everybody the truth. The description says, "It comes as a surprise to Sophia and her family when her big brother Lenny starts talking about protests, overstayers, and injustices against Pacific Islanders by the government. Inspired by the Black Panthers in America, a group has formed called the Polynesian Panthers, who encourage immigrant and indigenous families across New Zealand to stand up for their rights. Soon, the whole family becomes involved in the movement." I really enjoyed this. I'm so glad Michelle recommended it to me because it was not on my radar and I hope that I can put it on yours. Content warning for police brutality, racism, injuries, bullying, and colonization. Next, we went to Paris and we had to read a book that has won an award, but our team was in last place, so we ended up getting an extra prompt. We had to read a book that fits the city prompt, but it must be a host favorite or has been recommended by a host. So I read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which is a book I was not going to read at all. And that was just mainly because I felt like I already knew what it was about because so many people have talked about it. It was just something I felt like I didn't really need to read. It wasn't that interesting to me. However, during the time I read this, an author was outed for doing Yellowface. Cindy has a whole video about it, so I'll link it down below if you're interested. This is a very popular book in the bookish space. Essentially, it is about Yellowface and publishing. It is following a woman who is very jealous of her Asian friend who is a best-selling author. And when that friend ends up dying, she takes her manuscripts and publishes them as her own. And it talks a lot about Yellowface and racism. It is very realistic to publishing. I am a book publicist, and as I read it, I was just nodding my head being like, yep, that's true. That's exactly true. And so the fact that this has happened more than once, like, we know the Freitas Moon situation, and if you don't, I'll also link Cindy's video down below. They were outed for faking their identity as a Latina person. They are not. They are just a white, non-binary person, and that was very disheartening. But this was fiction, but is it really? I listened to it on audio and I enjoyed it. I can understand why it's very popular. Content warning is for Yellowface, racism, death, and allergic reaction. Next, I got to sightsee with another host favorite for the prompt to read a book with an animal on the cover, so I chose the manga Dinosaur Sanctuary Volume 1 by Itaru Kinoshita, and this was about a dinosaur sanctuary. This was really interesting. Manga is so out of my comfort zone. I find it hard to read sometimes because my brain is already all over the page when I'm reading and wants to read what it says at the bottom, and so manga confuses me so much more. But I've read 2 manga this month, so I am getting into my manga era, possibly. I'm enjoying what I'm reading of manga. I've only read 2 prior, so I will read more because I enjoy it. This is pitched as a cozy Jurassic Park, but it really talks about paleontology and dinosaurs and how animals can be treated in spaces like this, especially zoos, because the higher ups deem one of the dinosaurs just not popular anymore, and so they don't want this dinosaur there anymore, and the workers try to fight for it. I enjoyed this. I would pick up the rest of the series because it was interesting. Obviously, Volume 1 is just an introduction, so I'm interested to see how the rest of the series goes. Another sightseeing book I read was Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant by Curtis Chin. This was a book I started in May for the Buzz Wordathon, and I never got around to finishing it, so I was able to finish it during the Amazing Readathon. I chose the sightseeing prompt a BIPOC author because this is a Chinese American author. This is Curtis's memoir. He is a gay Chinese American. He grew up in 1980s Detroit, and he just talks about the life lessons he learned. It also talks about him not liking his Asian identity as a kid, masculinity, a lot of cultural norms and gender roles that were put onto him, which made him afraid to express his sexuality and dive deeper, but it goes all the way to college, and you get to see how his life has changed. This says that he is an activist. I don't really know too much about him, but I enjoyed this. It wasn't my favorite thing. I thought it was fine. Honestly, I thought it was a little long, but I didn't hate it. I liked what I read. I'm glad that I was able to read it, but it wasn't my favorite thing. Next up is my favorite book of the month. We went to Cape Town, South Africa, and we had to read a book with nature on the cover, so I chose A Scatter of Light by Melinda Lowe, and I've missed her writing. I am probably now her biggest fan. I cannot wait to read more of her books. I have Ash, so I would like to read that next. This was the companion to Last Night at the Telegraph Club, which I really enjoyed. I also have a vlog of that. I read it because it was a TikTok favorite, so I'll have that video up above as well and in my description if you want to check it out. This is set 60 years after the Last Night at the Telegraph Club took place. We're following Aria, who is a recent high school graduate, and she's spending the summer with her grandmother Joan, who I adore. This is a lot about art and discovering your sexuality. I always love a YA coming of age where the character finds out her sexuality and is just exploring. I think those stories are so fun and personal. There are some mentions of the characters in The Last Night at the Telegraph Club. I won't go into that too much because I don't want to spoil it. Arya Summer is not what she thought it would be. She was supposed to go to Martha's Vineyard with her friends, but after a scandal, she ends up having to stay with her grandmother in San Francisco. With a queer awakening, your first queer crush, and learning more about her family's history, this is a love letter to art and queerness. This quickly became my favorite book of the year. I loved the audiobook. I just love this storytelling. However, my one gripe is there is a cheating element, and I just didn't think we needed that. However, it is still one of my favorite books. I love this so much. I may like it a little bit better than Last Night at the Telegraph Club, but I definitely want to reread that book just to see how it holds up now that I've read this companion. I will read anything that Melinda Lowe writes. I love her so much, and I think she is such a phenomenal author. So it is sapphic and really talks about family history. And she has a complicated relationship with her mother. She's way more close to her dad. So if you like books with complicated mother-daughter relationships, I highly recommend this. Content warning for death of a grandparent, stroke, medical content, scenes at a hospital, and mention of a loved one in the hospital, cheating, internalized homophobia and lesbophobia, sexual content, grief, and a toxic relationship. This is very queer, talks about art, it's historical fiction, it's set in 2014, I believe, and if you liked The Last Night at the Telegraph Club, I think you'll really enjoy this. Then we had Face Off. This took place Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern to Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, and you basically just read a bunch of short books to get your team points. The story behind Face Off is that we were stuck in an airport, and depending on how many books we read, that determined how fast we found an item, and we also got to vote if we wanted easy, medium, or hard. This was challenging, but I really enjoyed the premise. It was really fun. Last year was all about countries' flags, so we had to spin a wheel, and whichever flag we got, we had to read a book that had those colors on the cover, but I liked this airport one way better. It was really fun to get objects, and I was a reading machine. I documented Face Off in a vlog where I let a number generator decide how long I read for. I shouldn't have done it for Face Off because I just wanted to read all the time. I was so hyperfixated on reading that I didn't really pay attention to what the wheel told me. I was like, oh, it's fine. So I would actually like to do that concept again when I don't have a readathon going on. So stay tuned. Maybe I'll do it in December or something. But definitely go and check that out if you want to know what I read for Face Off. I'll tell you the titles, but I'm not going to review them here because I already did it in that vlog. Grief Slut by Evelyn Berry. This was a poetry collection. By Your Side by Margarita Scala, which was a short story following a queer platonic friendship. Magical Boy Volume 2 by The Cow. How to Be Ace by Rebecca Burgess, a graphic memoir. A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, which was the sequel to A Song for the Wild Built, and Confessions of a Shy Baker Volume 1 by Mashomi Ito. At the end of that vlog, I mentioned 2 books that I was reading but didn't complete. I will tell you one of those. It is When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nevo. I'll be honest, I did not give this book my full attention, and fantasy is very hard for me to read. So I would love to reread this and maybe start with the first novella and read both of them together, because I was a little confused. Like I said, I know I didn't give it my full attention, but here's what it's about. Cleric Chi finds themselves and their companions at the mercy of a band of fierce tigers who ache with hunger. To stay alive until the mammoths can save them, Chi must unwind the intricate layered story of the tiger and her scholar lover, a woman of courage, intelligence, and beauty, and discover how truth can survive becoming history. I really enjoyed the storytelling, and it talked about Asian mythology. So like I said, I would love to reread this and give it my full attention and read the whole duology. My plan before the end of the year is to read this duology and give it my full attention. I read it for the sightseeing prompt, a book with 5 vowels on the cover. At the end of Face Off, our flight finally came and we boarded to go to Antananarivo. We had to read a book that either featured gods or religion, so I ended up picking up We Have Always Been Here by Samara Habib. During Face Off, I went to Phoenixville, PA, which I also mentioned in that vlog, and I picked up 3 books, and this was one of them. I was so glad to finally get around to this and be able to read a book that I just bought, because I never do that. This is a refugee immigrant memoir following a queer Pakistani Canadian person, and it is their story of immigrating as a refugee to Canada and a lot of the cultural differences that they experienced, arranged marriages, and just coming into their queerness. I really enjoyed this. I tabbed it so much. There were so many quotes. It is such a quote-worthy book. I used one of the quotes from this book in my caption for my No Pride in Genocide book stack, so I'll link that down below. It was on Instagram. It was an initiative created by a bookstagrammer who was going to donate $2 for every stack to a Palestinian organization. So like I said, that'll be linked down below if you want to know more information and you just want to check out the stack. After Antananarivo, we headed to Seoul, Korea. We ended up having to read a book with light on the cover, but our team also came in last, so we had an extra challenge again. This was that we had to read a book that is 100 more pages than your last read. I counted this with 220 pages, so I had to read a book with 320 or more. So I finally picked up You Don't Have a Shot by Raquel Marie. This was my other sapphic sports romance. I was loving the sapphic sports romances in June. I'm so glad I finally got to read Raquel's work. I had been saying forever that I wanted to read her. I ended up getting the audiobook and I loved this. This also was pretty dark. It talks about also kind of like pressure from family, but if you liked Running with Lions by Julian Winters, this is a great comp because it is set at a soccer camp, and I love books that are set at camp, especially during summer. They are the best books, and this is a rivals to lovers following 2 girls. They are soccer rivals and they hate each other. We're following Valentina and Leticia. Valentina is the captain on her girls' soccer team. When she ends up doing something to Leticia that her coach does not like, she's ripped of that status. And she is so hurt. Valentina has a lot to learn, and I love messy queer characters so much. She's also grieving the loss of her mother, and there is just a lot going on with her. I just love those kind of characters. But her friends convince her to go to a soccer camp for the summer, and Leticia is there. And they have to be civil, and they learn that they actually have feelings for each other. I loved this so much. It was so great. I'm so glad I finally picked it up. Content warnings for mention of cancer, emotionally abusive parent, bullying, racism, xenophobia, grief, loss of a parent, sports injury, anxiety, and anxiety attack on page. For the representation, Valentina is a Colombian Irish American, and she's also asexual and pan-romantic. Leticia is sapphic and Latine. There are queer side characters who are in a relationship, and one side character is a trans girl. Next, we went to Bangkok, and we had to read a book with 5 colors on the cover. So I chose Lucky Red by Claudia Cravens. This was also sent to me by Dial Press, so thanks to them because I loved this. It is a sapphic western. Need I say more? It is about a 16-year-old girl, Bridget, who becomes an orphan when her father dies by being bitten by a snake. He is also an alcoholic, so trigger warning for that. When her father dies, she ends up becoming an orphan, and she finds a brothel of queer women. It is so liberating. This is a western, so you have action, gun violence, horses. The fact that she finds a women brothel, I love those kind of stories. So if you're looking to read more westerns, I have to recommend this, and I highly recommend the audiobook. I'll have my Libro FM affiliate link down below if you want to pick it up. It is so good. Honestly, I think I just love the audiobook. I'm like, this story could have sucked. It didn't. I just loved the vibes. I've only read another western, it's not queer, but I read it so many years ago, and this just gave me so many good vibes. It was such a fun read, and definitely one I would love to give a reread because it was so fun. Content warnings for blood, alcoholism, obviously the father gets bitten by a snake and dies. There's sexual content, gun violence, and parent death. I would say to go out of your comfort zone and pick this up. It is such a fun western, and I loved it so much. If you're looking for some queer joy and liberation, this one has it. Next, we went to Auckland, New Zealand, and we had to read a book with water on the cover, but we also came in last, so we also had to read a book where the author's name was below the title, so I picked up Chlorine by Jade Zong. This is a literary horror. It is also sapphic. There is dual perspectives. I really enjoyed that. We have the perspective from our main character, Ren, who believes she's a mermaid. She is also dealing with mental health issues and pressure from being a student swimmer. Her coach is a piece of shit, so big trigger warning for abuse. I was really shocked on Storygraph that abuse was not mentioned at all. And in just the first chapter alone, the coach was super abusive. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse. Why is that not on there? Honestly, if you have been in the swimming space, I was a swimmer for like a second, but my brother actually was a diver, so I recommended him this book immediately because I was like, you are really gonna resonate with this. I really enjoyed this, and I don't really like literary fiction that much. Sometimes it's just hard for me to understand, but this was so interesting. I think having the audiobook really helped. I had the audiobook from Libro FM's ALC program, and then we have Kathy, who is Ren's lover, and she is writing these letters to her, and Ren doesn't know that she is in love with her. Oh my god, it was so good. Highly recommend for a literary horror, which I've never even read that before, but I highly recommend it. It was so good. The audiobook narrator is Catherine Ho, and she did a fantastic job with both of the girls' voices, and it was just so creepy. The horror elements were there, and that's why I love audiobooks. Content warnings for depictions and descriptions of self-harm and body horror, racism, emotional, physical, and verbal abuse, sexual assault, medical content, toxic relationship with an adult, inappropriate relations with an adult, concussion, mention and depictions of an eating disorder, and suicidal thoughts. If any of those content warnings are sensitive for you, I don't recommend this book because it is dark. You might think from the cover that it's not, but it's really dark. And last, to end our excursion on the Amazing Readathon, our last destination was Los Angeles, California, and we had to read a book that we wanted to be adapted into a movie. So my easy pick was Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. This would be a perfect movie. Camp Damascus is a searing and earnest horror debut about the demons the queer community faces in America, the price of keeping secrets, and finding the courage to burn it all down. That is is the best way I can describe it, and that is just pulled from the description. It is set in Montana, and it says, home to a God-fearing community with a heart of gold. Nestled high up in the mountains is Camp Damasucus, the self-proclaimed most effective gay conversion camp in the country. Here, a life free from sin awaits. But the secret behind the success is anything but holy. This is Brianna's recommendation, and it is amazing. I loved this so much. I listened to the audiobook and also had the physical copy from the library. If you are a queer person, maybe deconstructing your religion, and you may have some religious trauma, content warning for that, and religious bigotry, and just kind of gaslighting, honestly. I loved the writing of this. It was so horror, and it is definitely one you could probably read in one day. It is so scary. And honestly kind of realistic. Our main character is Rose. Her parents are horrible people. They are terrifying, and it is her just trying to escape from them, and then she ends up going to Camp Damasucus. I feel like I can't even really tell you what it's about. You just have to experience it for yourself. If you're looking to read some horror in October or just the fall months, have this on your radar. Put it on your TBR. I ended up getting to LA pretty early, so I had some time to sightsee, where I finished 3 books. First, I finished the manga at 30. I realized I had no gender, life lessons from a 50-year-old after 2 decades of self-discovery, translated by Mizel Gutierrez. The author is intersex, so I thought we were gonna learn a little bit about being an intersex person, which we kind of did, but also it was really just for fans of this artist, and I was confused because it didn't really give me a lot of context. It would kind of just be like, you know, my partner, you know this. And I was like, I don't, because I don't know who you are. Like, I don't know anything. I was hoping I would learn more. Honestly, it triggered me a little bit because it does talk about transness. So it was like trans people asking questions and getting some reassurance. That's something I don't need, but it does talk a lot about your body. And not in like a beautiful body trans way. It was just a lot about like dysphoria and a lot of that stuff. I just don't like to read that stuff. I don't want to think about it, and I wish I would have been warned a little bit. Yeah, I didn't like it. I mean, you might like it. I just was not the audience for it. And quite frankly, I was so confused. Content warnings for gender dysphoria and a lot of mentions of body and sexual content. I read it for the sightseeing prompt, a book with under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. Next, I finished Northranger by Ray Ticchiero with illustrations by Brie Indigo. This is a Northanger Abbey retelling, and it is queer. This is about Cade Munoz, who lives in Texas, and he is assigned with his father to go to a farm to work. He meets a guy there, and it is really talking about homophobia in the South and how 2 boys are not safe there. However, Cade loves horror movies. The only way I can describe this book is, you know when you watch a horror movie and you are scared straight? That is this book. There are so many twists and turns sometimes that you feel like you're watching a horror movie, which is really fun. It also talks about heavy topics. There's racism, homophobia, like I said, death of a parent, cancer, but I thought this was cute yet dark, and I loved it. And the final book, number 24. What's funnier than 24? 25, but no, we only have 24.
Hey, Patrick.
What?
I thought of something funnier than 24.
Let me hear it.
25.
The Moth Keeper by K.O. Neal. It's self-explanatory. It's about a moth keeper. This is about Anya, who is a moth keeper, and they are the protector of the moon moths. The luminous creatures enable the night flower to bloom, and the night village needs the flower to thrive. Night after night, it is lonely in the desert, with only one lantern for light. Still, Anya is eager to prove her worth, to show her thanks to her friends and her village. But is it worth the cost? And yet, something isn't right. What happens when Anya glimpses the one thing that could destroy what what she's meant to protect. The only thing she has secretly longed for her whole life. So it is about a Moth Keeper and something ends up going wrong and they have to protect the moths and they have to try and find them in order for this night flower to be able to still bloom. I love the illustrations and writing of K.O. Neal, so this was fun, but it wasn't anything special, honestly. Like, I didn't love it, but I thought it was fine, and I'm glad that I got to read it. We actually won the leg prior, so we ended up getting a bonus, which was we could use any other sightseeing prompt again. So if I wanted to read another BIPOC author, I could. I ended up reading this for a book with one person on the cover. That's everything. Holy shit, my camera is freaking beeping at me because it's probably dying. My footage says an hour and 23 minutes. Oh my god. I'm never doing this again. I'm never doing 24 books again. The Amazing Readathon wasn't the only thing that I participated in during June. I had to participate in Lit Readathon. I do it every year. This is created by my friend Kathy and Rogan. I'll have everything linked down below. They're doing monthly prompts this year, as well as one Lit Readathon in June and another in December, like always, but throughout the month they are giving prompts. So if you want to read more queer books and you need prompts like I do, go and check that out. Here is my final board. For graphic, I chose How to Be Ace. For number in the title, I read at 30. I realized I had no gender. For the choose your own prompt, I picked neurodiverse rep, and that was the Luis Ortega Survival Club. For rainy day read, I picked Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. For night, I used the Moth Keeper since it had the night flower. For international, I used Confessions of a Shy Baker since that was set in Japan. For immigrants, I read We Have Always Been Here. For great outdoors, I could have picked Camp Damascus or You Don't Have a Shot since that was set at camp and sometimes set outside. For mental health, I also chose How to Be Ace because it talks about OCD. For creepy queers, I picked Camp Damascus. Non-European mythology was When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. Continued, I chose Playing for Keeps since I continued and finished it in June. And last, for magic, I chose Magical Boy Volume 2 by The Cow. Before I go, I want to talk about books that I started and didn't finish. For the Black History Square, I started Choosing Family, a memoir of queer motherhood and black resistance by Francesca T. Roaster. This talks about queer parenthood. She is sapphic and her and her wife were trying to adopt children, and she talks about how being a queer parent is different, and also talks about religion, specifically I believe Christianity or just like Catholicism. I'm not entirely sure on that right now. I did start The Skin in This Girl by Sarah Cipher. I just never finished it, and that was one of the group reads. And last, I started the Kamigawa Food Detectives by Hisashi Kishawi, and so hopefully I'll finish those. You can check out my July reading plans. I'm doing the mid-year reading scramble, and I would love for you to join us. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Alex. This is Pucks and Paperbacks, where I love to shout about queer and trans books, so if you're interested in that, feel free to hit subscribe. It's free, and the best way to support this channel is to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what your favorite book of the month was, maybe your least favorite book, and have you read any of the books that I read? Did you participate in the Amazing Readathon? How did it go? Maybe the Lit Readathon? Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video very soon.